Okay, hello there everyone. How are we all? Hope you're all well. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. So I'm just looking for something that's got a brush on it. Yeah, perfect. A bit of water on. How are we all? Hi. Who do we have? Hi Jill. Hi Lorraine. Hi Kathy. Oh, you got a cold afternoon. Yeah, we're cold here. And Evelyn is in Scotland. Frosty and foggy. Oof. Good day for crafting, definitely. It's a good day to be indoors by the sounds of it. So hopefully you can all hear me. Yeah. You preempted my question there, Valerie. Thank you. Loud and clear. That's brilliant. It's good to have you here. Hi, Donna. Oh, you're from Massachusetts. Lovely to have you here. Lorraine has a cup of coffee in hand. Do you know what, Lorraine? I haven't had a coffee yet this morning. And as soon as I've finished with you here, that will be the first thing I go and do. I'm about ready for a coffee. Hi, Helen. How are you? What's your weather like down there, Helen? Oh, talking about coffees. Give me a frog in my throat there. We had a lovely bright sunny day yesterday. It was really, really blue skies. Freezing cold, absolutely freezing cold, but I don't mind that because it's a lot easier to wrap up against the warm than it is to stay dry, don't you think? But it's a lot grayer here today. I'm looking out through murky windows from the storm last weekend. It's so windy. So yeah, that's just reminded me that I've got another job to do. Cloudy and cold, yeah. Oh, it's pretty much the same as here, Helen. Just cold and generally, isn't it? Anyway, I'm pleased you can all see me and hear me. That's great because last week I actually had fibre broadband fitted at last. So I'm hoping now that that will be the end to all of my internet problems. And so hopefully I can come and stream to you a lot smoother. The picture certainly looks a lot clearer today, actually. And do you know what? It makes our life here at home a lot easier. We were using satellite internet, so obviously we were very dependent on the weather. Any tiny bit of bad weather or whatever, we'd just knock it out. We'd have to constantly reset the internet umpteen times a day, so it's really annoying. But hopefully we're all sorted now. Cold and wet in Essex. Oh yeah, I think there seems to be the general consensus up and down the country, doesn't it, Lorraine? Cold and wet everywhere, so stay inside, nice and warm, either with coffee and a nice warm blanket, I'd say. So let's get crafting then. Today what I thought I'd do with you is use the Magnolia Corner. I can't remember if I've used this on a live or not before, but I checked on YouTube and there wasn't, I couldn't find a video using this specifically, so that was as good a reason as any I needed to use this in a live with you, just so as we can build up hopefully a video for each of the products that Lisa has brought out. That's the idea. It's a bit of a mammoth task, but you know, slowly but surely we'll get there, I think. But anyway, whatever I use with you, it's a gorgeous design, and sometimes I do struggle to know what to use with you. But what I also thought I would do is use the, actually I didn't put it on the list there. I'm just going to grab my pack from here. Also what I thought I would do is use the Whitecore card with you as well, and just show you how you can mix the two types of products together. So if you can just see the card that I've used here, I've stenciled the Magnolia, but what I've done, I've actually cut that out. Now the Magnolia collection does not come with a die, but it's so easy to fussy cut this out. Oh, hi Becky, how are you? Oh yeah, fiberboard makes a huge difference. We've only been waiting 15 years for it. So I knew that it was available and I knew that everybody else was using it. I just didn't have it here. But now I do. Ireland has finally caught up, thankfully. But yeah, with this card here, what I've done, I've used the Whitecore in the background, but I haven't stenciled on it. I've stenciled on Lisa's super smooth white cardstock. And I've fussy cut out the flower and then reattached it back onto the background. Now, if you're doing that, of course, you don't have to actually use the background that is part of the Magnolia Corner. If you think about it, you can actually put it on the against any background, but because I haven't really used this very much, I love the wood grain in the background here, so I did stick with it. But that is definitely something to think about. If you were to use this technique and make a card similar, or use any other floral die that doesn't have a background to it, you can add it onto here. But there's a couple of designs now that Lisa has brought out where we have the main stenciled image in the foreground, but we have the background, which is sometimes nice to do a different or create a point of difference between the two images. So because it's all in one embossing folder, I thought I'd show you how we can change that up. I use the Whitecore cardstock. Now I'm using the bluer colour here. I tend to be going for the bluer colours each time I use this, so I really must push myself out of my comfort zone and go into the pinks and purples, purely because I just love blue. So I always gravitate towards that blue, but one of these days I will change over. So I forgot to put that on the list. This I think is on the website, but the code for this is Lisa Horncraft, so LHC PP052. And what I will do, I will put that information below the video a little bit later on YouTube. Let me pop that there. So the other two sets that I just want to show you quickly are relating to the sentiment here. I thought I've stamped the sentiments, and I just thought I'd go for something a little bit different. Just use a couple of sets that I haven't bought out in a good while. Both of these are available online. We have the cracked bark texture set here. It's an A5 set. It's a set of stamps, so you get this lovely huge stamp here, and let me just show you the size of that. It's massive. It's a lovely texture background, but you also have these lovely little sentiments here, which is what I wanted to actually use. So you can see the little sentiments here. Happy birthday to you in that like typewriter font, and then I've stamped the U, which is a separate stamp here. So I'll just show you the way the stamps. That's not very easy to see. Let me put that against the blue. There you go. So you have your massive stamp here, and if I put my hand against the sides of that, you'll see how big it is. But these sentiments are really, really lovely. This U is a standalone, but so are each of these little sentiments here, so you can mix and match. So yeah, I just thought I'd use something a little bit different. So that was the set that I've used there. What I've also added on is this little mini sentiment set here, which is basically laid out in the same way. You have all of these words with the one focal word here in a script. All of these different events, actually, these are occasions, are all individual stamps, so you can mix and match each of those as well. And I think when I make this again, I'll put a Christmas message on there. I think I'll make it Happy Christmas. We've got happy and we've got the Christmas there. So I think this would work as a Christmas card. I might try and add a little bit of interference ink, so perhaps got a little bit of sparkle going on there. I think it works as a Christmas card, or if not, it's definitely a winter birthday card, a winter greetings card. So you can see on the side here on the slide that I've put down, I've put the list of the colours that I'm using. Yeah, I've added the Yuletide Sky. I haven't added Yuletide Sky on this one, which is the interference thing, but I will probably try and include that on this one that I'm going to stencil with you now. And actually thinking about it before I move on, I'm using the Arctic Frost, but I just want to show you before I continue. This is the Whitecore card. You won't be able to see it yet, but this is the card that I've used in the background. And don't these colours just work really nicely together? So that I've used the Arctic Frost ink to stencil the flowers here, and it just matches perfectly with the Whitecore card and the blue from it as well. So I thought that was just worth noting as well, just in case. I think sometimes people have a bit of a tricky time matching colours and whatever, and they, you know, sometimes they just need a little bit of just a little bit of a prompt just to know what things match with where. So I'm just going to get rid of this slide now, just so as I've got the whole screen. There we are. And I can put back on your comments there. And I think somebody says, what was the name of the ST6 of the stencils? Do you mean the stencils are the Magnolia Corner layering stencils. Sorry, I couldn't get that out then. So we have a set of layering stencils, and we have the 3D embossing folder. And as I say, there's no dye associated with this, but don't let that put you off at all. So we get stenciling. Actually, I forgot to get myself some card. Excuse me there, I just reached back for a piece of card, so hear all the rustling. So I'm using Lisa's super smooth cardstock to stencil onto, and I'm just going to cut this down to size because that is a little bit too large for what I need at the moment. Okay, move that to one side. So we have our smaller piece here. Now the set of stencils that we have here, we have a set of 6 actually, and I don't have enough space on my screen. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put that there because I do actually want to refer to the packaging. I'll refer to the packaging and I'll also refer to what I've stenciled to as well, because I just want to take a slightly different approach to the colouring of this today. Now, magnolias, as you're probably aware, are not necessarily a blue colour, but what I do want to do is just try and recreate something of a white flower. Now, I think I've done this before. It's something I really like to do. I really like the effect that I have when it comes out of it. But what I want to do, I'm going to use what I've already stenciled, and I'm also going to use Lisa's packaging also, because what that will do, and this is what I've stenciled, I've already embossed this as well. This will give me where the darker areas and the more shadowy areas of the flower are. And that's where I'm going to concentrate most of the ink. So there'll be a lot of these petals, which hopefully on the one that I'm going to do now, are going to be a lot whiter than even the one here. So as I stencil it, actually, I sort of bore that in mind when I was doing this one. It almost had like the negative feeling from a photograph, but it all came together. I did wonder, I think, oh, is this, you know, is it actually working? But I bared with it, you know, I stuck with it, and it did actually work. And it's, so hopefully you'll like the effect as well. So I'm going to start off with the Arctic Frost. So stencil number 1, as with pretty much all of Lisa's stencils, it gives you the initial outline of the focal point that you're stenciling. My advice and Lisa's advice is always never go too heavy on the colour for this one, and particularly when you're wanting to recreate a white flower, that is definitely the case. So I'm just going to pick up a tiny amount of ink, use what's left on the stencil, and I'm really just going to create an outline of these flowers just by going around the outside. Now hopefully my camera's going to be good enough to pick this up, but I'm going to be putting on such a small amount of ink. Now we have a really delicate piece in the center here. To deal with that, what I generally do, I just move my brush just in one direction over that delicate area there. I just move the brush in the direction that the stencil is sitting in. There'd be no point me coming this way over that, because it will make this sort of delicate area really flick up. So you go with the stencil, you just work with it and you just brush that over. And as I move this stencil away in a second, you'll see that that would have given me enough colour. And I can just continue round with the rest of these. I'm just going to hold this down and just make sure that I put 2 pressure points on either side of the design, because that just makes sure that the stencil stays in place and doesn't really flick up. And then I can just come around here. So this is such a light layer of ink. I'll try not to keep my hands in the way for too much. Now I've got quite a lot of ink there. That doesn't matter. We work with what we have. Nothing in nature is perfect anyway, is it? So I'm going to take that away, and that you'll see very, very light layer. I mean, you can see it well on there. I'm just going to flick the camera, so hopefully, is that a spot? Yeah, there's a spot on my screen there. I've just noticed how dirty my computer screen is, but you can see there that there is of ink, but there's enough to give a hue in the background. This little delicate area here is the little area that I was talking about on my stencil. You see? So, oh, excuse my mucky fingers as well. True craft room process there. So I'll flick you back over. So we have stencil number 2. Now this is where I spent the majority of my time earlier on adding the colour. There'd be absolutely nothing wrong with you taking your blending brush or your or a stencil brush and picking up the ink and blending whichever colour you're using over the entire flower. There'd be absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever, because that's what these stencils are designed to do, and you would get a fabulous result from that. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to be using my stencil brushes, and I'm going to be referring to the picture and what I've done here, and just adding different amounts of colour in different areas through these petals. Something you might want to give a try. It's something that might take you a lot longer to master than just putting the ink all over, but look, it's worth a try, isn't it? Hi Lorraine, can't wait for Lisa to introduce us to the new die cutting machine. No, neither can I haven't seen it yet. She's teasing us all, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that too. So as I say, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be really taking my time with adding the ink here, so hopefully you can bear with me, and I'll try and explain my process as I go along. Now if you look at Lisa's packaging here, because it's all in the grey relief, it's actually a really nice representation of the embossing. So you can see with the open flower here, you can see where the shadow areas are. So the inside of the flower, because of these leaves, the petals are curled round, the inside of the flower is going to be darker. But because I want to create white petals, I'm going to leave these bits that have turned over on the edges here, which would be the outside of the petal. I'm going to try and leave those white and put most of the colour on the inside. And that would, I'm going to follow that theme on all of the petals as far as I can with the stencil brush. It's not an easy thing to do, but if you can sort of do the majority of that in that way, you will, and stay consistent with each of the areas, you know, I think you'll have a good stab at actually getting there, you know, a good attempt. So I'm going to start with this flower here. I'm going to start with these 2 areas, which relates to this section. So I've picked up a good bit of ink. I'm using this central piece of the stencil to blend the ink and then move on to the cardstock. So you can see there that I have quite a lot of ink going down, and I'm going to make sure that I put a lot of ink down also. Now I've found, just with a little bit of playing, I will swap to my smaller brushes at some stage, but I really found the original pack of stencil brushes, where you have these three, before Lisa brought out like these the stubby ones, if the larger brush from that original set works really well. So I'm just add that ink down here, and I'm just going to make sure that that covers all the inside of these petals. Now you can see these areas here, which is where the outside of the petal is going to be. So that is where I'm going to attempt to leave them white. So I'm not going to be too fussed with, you know, it's not easy to do with this, the stencil brushes, you know. But as I say, if I can get the majority of the ink there and try and keep these areas white, then that's what I'll do. So this petal here would relate to this one, and that's the outside of the petal because it's facing us. So I'm going to leave that as far as I can white. So the next lot of area that I'm going to add ink to is this one here, where you can see the inside of the petal. So again, that gives me the cue to come in with the blue and use this area of the stencil here. Now what I'm going to do, because of the, let me bring in the coloured card. Now if I show you this stencil brush, you can see the angle on that. What I'm going to do, when I usually stencil, I hold the brush at an angle, so this flat area is sitting directly onto the cardstock. But what I'm going to do, the way that I hold my stencil brush, I'm going to turn it around, okay, so I have the slant of the brush facing upwards, and now I have this little point of the highest area here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up my ink with that area here, with the largest sort of the tip there, and I'm going to use that area and come into this lower section of this petal here, okay. Now apologies if that seemed like I was explaining it to, you know, to younger people. What I want to do is just try and get it as clear to you as across, and obviously I'm also conscious there are different people at different levels of their crafting here also, so bear with me if you're already sort of familiar with using the brush in this way. But what that gives me the chance to do, it gives me a little bit more control as to where I place that ink down in these finer areas. I could use the smaller stencil brush, but with the nature of these brushes, the smaller stencil brush doesn't pick up quite as much ink, which is fine in one way because that's what they're designed to do, but I really wanted that concentration of ink down the bottom there. As I say, if you were doing this and you didn't want to worry about keeping some areas white, then obviously go ahead and use a stencil brush as I would normally do in these cases. So the next petal I want to think about is this tiny little sliver here, and you can tell the inside of the petals actually because they've got the most of the markings on the embossed markings or debossed markings when you run them through the folder. So this little area here again is in shadow, so I want to use that to add the blue, and that's this little section just here. And again, I'm just going to use that fine edge of the brush to add my ink into there, and you can see the concentration of that ink that I'm adding, and it's quite a precise placement actually, if you can see what I'm doing there. So I'm not going to go all the way in, I'm just now going to use the stencil brush and sort of blend that in the best I can across that area, like so. Again, if at this stage, because it's a small area and I go into an area that I want to stay white, well then so be it. That's, you know, it's the nature of the beast. It's nothing precise really. Okay, so where are we with that now? The next large area are these two petals here. So this one here and this one here. So these two areas on the stencil. So again, I can come in, use my brush and add the blue into there also, like so. Now again, I do appreciate this is possibly a lot more fiddly than how I would stenciled with you previously and other times. It's nice to show you these different techniques. Whether you decide to do that or not is entirely up to you, but it gives you a good starting point. And then if you want to follow along and watch the video afterwards, then obviously you can stop and start the YouTube video and really take your time over this. But if you want to create a real project and just test yourself perhaps a little bit with Lisa stencils, then this is you know, an ideal way to do that. Now what I'm going to do, bring in my smaller brush and see if I can just get that little bit of colour in there. And you know what, it's actually quite relaxing doing it, because you're still doing the same. You're still adding ink, you're still adding the ink gradually, you know, so you're still blending, and you find yourself sort of getting lost in the process, which I think is really nice. So that's that flower sorted. I'm just going to even that up around there a little bit more. What I do like to do is have a really strong amount of colour around the central part of the flower. So I'm going to take exactly the same thought process to this top flower here and the bud that is sitting there. Now, if you can refer to the one that I stenciled earlier on, you can see now that I sort of followed those cues stenciling this one. This top flower is, I think, a bit easier to manage because it is larger. It's a little bit easier to see where the shadow areas are going to. So hopefully I'll try and speed up a little bit for you now. So you can see this particular petal on the inside there is a really good size for this brush. And I can add that colour there. I'm going to still concentrate the majority of the colour in the centre of the flower because that's something that I really like to do. And I'm just going to work that into this petal like so. We have tiny little areas on the outside here, where the outside of the petal is showing. So I'm going to try and keep that as white as I can. Lisa designs these so cleverly that we have folded areas of the petals. It doesn't actually come apparent until you emboss a lot of these designs, which is why it's always good to look at the packaging that Lisa's provided us, particularly with the on the embossing folder there, because you can sort of see the relief, you can see the high and low areas, even just from the image before you've actually embossed. Now, the other thing to do is to emboss this first, and then you can add the colour over the top also. That would be perhaps another way to tackle this. So this is a bud here, and it's just, from the way that I can see it, it's just slightly opening, so we can see the inside of the flower. So obviously I'm going to do that blue in there. I'm just going to swap to a smaller brush just so as I can perhaps just blend that in a little bit better. Let's see how we go with that. Oh yeah, this is working quite nicely. We have this flower here, and I'm just going to keep this area white and come into this area blue. Let's have a look. How many of the large blending brushes do you recommend having at the moment? Only have 2. I think if you're starting off with any sort of brush collection, the best way to think about it is having 1 per colour family. That's a really safe way of doing it, because then it means that all the colours with the yellow tones have their own brush, or the colour with the blue tones have their brush. What you don't want to be doing is like using a blue tone brush to work with pink, because then you'll be making purple when you're changing the you could potentially be changing sort of the colours of the inks that you're using. So if you initially, if you can't stretch to having one brush per ink pad colour, I'd go in colour tones. And then to clean the brushes in between colours, it's like we have 3 or 4 different types of blue, but if you're using one brush between them, then obviously you still want to clean in between, because if you go from a light blue to a dark blue, and then what I would suggest doing, perhaps not that, I'll bring in a microfiber cloth. The other one was microfiber, but it was grey, so you couldn't really see it. Now this one was yellow, but it's all sorts of colours now. So I suggest a microfiber cloth, but you can do it on a piece of scrap paper or a piece of kitchen towel, and just clean your brush. You don't need to wet it. You just need to clean your brush and just scrub it backwards and forwards, and just that scrubbing motion is going to clean off all the ink. So you'd be able to then go and use this on another colour of a different extreme. So you'd be able to go clean off all the dark blue ink and then go into a light colour, and that would work really well for you. Okay, so we have, let me see, probably one more petal here on the outside that I want to add some dark into. So let me speed up a little bit. As I say, it's this layer. If you're wanting to really go into detail and shading like I'm doing today, then this layer number 2 on the Magnolia is the one that is going to take the time. I will speed up and it will be a lot quicker process through the rest of these stencils. So there you can see now it looks a bit patchy. It really does. And I got to this stage myself earlier and I'm thinking, oh, you know, is this actually going to work? But I stuck with it and it all turned out in the end. So that is that stencil number 2 sorted. Now what I will do, I'm just taking a large Arctic Frost brush. I'm just going to take off, well, blend in all the rest of the ink that is around the outside, just in an attempt just to go across the whole design, just to perhaps just even it all up. I'm not looking really to add any more colour. It's just a way to clean up the stencil and just perhaps smooth out any areas that might have needed a bit more smoothing. So when I take that away, this flower looks pretty good, but it looks a little bit abstract up here, but say bear with it. So stencil number 3, this is when we can start bringing in some foliage and some other colours. So we have the stems of the Magnolia. You could do this in brown. I've chosen to use Garden Sage because it's a really nice muted sort of colour. It just works so well with this type of card, or the way that I wanted the card to look. So I'm blending in the Garden Sage. Now I am going on quite heavy with this because what I think this does, and you'll see it here, it really sort of makes these flowers sort of pop. As I say, you could use brown if you wanted, or another green. It's entirely up to you, but I just like the tones of the Garden Sage and the Arctic Frost work so well together. You can see there. So stencil number 4, we have the centre of the flowers and some leaves coming in. So I'm going to use what is left on my stencil brush and just go quite light initially on the flowers that are there. I'm picking up a lot of ink. Now, when I pick up my ink, I don't know how you do this. When I want to keep it controlled, I just literally just dab my brush, whether it be one of these or the black blending brush. I just literally dab it onto the pad. Because the pads are so juicy, I pick up enough ink for me to be able to work with. If I wanted to add a lot of ink, what I would do is run and stroke the brush over the top of the ink pad, and that way I know that I'd pick up an awful lot more, but then I have more ink on my brush to control, which can be slightly tricky at times. So when I'm blending, I'd rather go from dip into the ink pad a lot more times and have that control with the amount of ink that I'm adding down. So I'm going to continue. Okay, I'm conscious that we have two areas here which are the centre of the flowers, which I want to add some yellow onto. So that will be the Pina Colada, and I'm just using the garden sage on the rest of the areas there. So I'm going to pick up my new brush for Pina Colada and just gently, because I don't want this yellow to really overpower, so I'm going to put that in really gently into the stencil there. Oh, hi Mum, how are you? Did you have a nice lunch? Now what I'm going to do, I will come back to this in a second. I'm just going to swap cameras, and you can see there with the stencil, I just went really lightly with the yellow, which works really nicely with the blue, but I want to add the centre of these flowers just a little bit more detail, and to do that, I'm still using the yellow, so tone on tone is absolutely perfect. I'm going to pick up a little bit more ink, and what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to stroke that over just the base of these flowers here. I'm not going backwards and forwards, I'm just stroking it up, and what that is doing, it's giving me a concentrated amount of colour at the base, and it's still leaving it pale at the top. So that's and I'm going to do exactly the same here, and it's a really nice way to get that graduated shading. So when I take that away now, the centre of those flowers have got a little bit more character to them, a little bit more depth, because we've added that little bit more colour at the base. Now you could add a lot more, and I think this can actually take just a little bit more colour, like so. So when I take that away, you can see now that we have some shading in the centre of the flowers, but it's really quite an easy way to do that. So I go back to the top. So you can see it's sort of coming together now, can't you? You know, stick with the process and it does work. So back now to garden sage. We even have the centre of the flowers here to add some detail, and I'm going to put garden sage over that lot as well, so no need to add an extra colour to there, I don't think. So this garden sage, for these leaves, what I'm probably going to do is go that little bit heavier, just so as it distinguishes them from the other leaves that we've already stenciled. You could add in a second green colour if you wanted to. That would be a different way to do it, but I think it's quite nice just to make sure that the two layers of leaves, if they're creating two separate sorts and they're not sort of stenciling over the top of each other, it's quite nice to create a point of difference between the two sets of leaves. So whether it be tone on tone and going darker, or you bring in another green. So you can see now that I'm actually stenciling back the way that I normally would, just coming into the different areas and stenciling into there. Again, what I tend to do, it's just my default way of stenciling, I tend to make the base of each of the leaves a lot darker than the outer tips of the edges. That's just the way I like to stencil. You could, if you wanted to, well, it's entirely up to you. Say everyone is different, which is the beauty of stenciling. If you wanted to create an entirely even level of colour across the whole leaf, then that's what you do. You know, it's not for me to tell you how to do this, but I'm just saying, putting across to you the way that I like, and hopefully give you some different options. And there's nothing wrong with swapping and changing either. But as I say, I just like the way that this comes together. So now, actually, we are on stencil number 6. So this is the final stencil. And before I change colour, I still have the garden sage brush in my hand. So I'm going to add the details to the leaves with the garden sage. Because again, what I like to do when I add these type of details, I like to still do this tone on tone. So I can see through the stencils all the areas where the garden sage is, so that I'm able to add the details to those leaves with the garden sage, so makes that tone on tone. I could, depending on the colours I've used, actually I could have used garden sage over the whole lot, that would work. But because I have the tools and I have the stencil brushes to be able to do it, and I can see through the stencil, I've now swapped to the Arctic Frost colour, and I'm going to start adding those details to the petals with the Arctic Frost. So again, that is going to be tone on tone, and I think it just gives a nice, oh, I'd hope if I didn't add it to a different colour. So I'm just going to bring in my cloth, just work off, I dipped into the garden sage by mistake there, so let's just wipe that away. There we go, too busy chatting. There we go, so I can carry on, and with the Arctic Frost I can add those details. Now also I can see there are areas that I haven't stenciled onto that are white through this stencil. Now I'm a bit of a dilemma. Do I stencil through them and add blue details to an otherwise white petal, or do I not? I think what I might do, I will just stencil really lightly on the areas of detail here where I can see it's white through to the card. I'm just going to stencil over them, but really, really lightly with blue. If nothing goes through to the card, then that's fine by me. But I think it might just be easier just for me to go all the way around with this Arctic Frost brush. I know that I have added extra ink to these darker areas here. So yeah, I'll be happy with that. Absolutely happy. So let's see what the reveal is. There we are. So let me swap to that now, and I can pick this up. And you can see, hopefully, that the inside of the flower has turned blue. And we've tried, you know, I've kept the outside of the petals as much as I can. I've kept them white. So it just gives you a different perspective on the flower. If that's a look that you like, then hopefully that will be something that you fancy having a try. But if you want to do it the other way around and keep the inside of the flowers lighter and do the petals, you know, whichever way you stencil it, I think at the end of the day it's going to turn out so pretty, because it is a lovely, lovely stencil. But it's nice just to give you, I don't know, a little bit of an idea, just to give something, do something a little bit different. Now, what I haven't done, I've got the Yuletide Sky here. I want to add just a tiny little amount of sparkle, and I'm going to do something a little bit different. Now, I know I've moved my stencil and I've moved the image, but I can do my best now because I've got the ultimate. So I know that I've come in with stencil number 2, and I can reline up my image under my stencil there. It actually works quite nicely. I've got the Yuletide Sky. I just want to add a tiny little bit of sparkle, because say this one I'm going to turn into a Christmas card. And what I was doing beforehand, I was just finding myself a water brush that had a little bit of water in it. Now, I don't know if Lisa has these on her website anymore, but you can use a paintbrush as well. Let me get a paintbrush and I'll show you the both ways. But oh, excuse me. The reason I want to do it this way round is because I don't have a fine enough tip or blending brush to use with the interference inks. I tend to use just the blending sponges, and I want to be a lot more precise than what this round blending sponge can give me, because I'm only going to add a tiny little amount, but hopefully it's going to add some impact. I'm going to take the interference ink. Now, I've gone for Yuletide Sky because this is a lovely blue colour that will match the Arctic Frost, and I think it's got a silvery tinge. So I'm going to, you can see the colour of it there actually. So this is onto a blending mat, tiny bit of ink. Now this water brush, it holds a water reservoir here. So it does mean that I don't need to have a jar of water beside me. So I'll use this first and then I'll use a brush afterwards. So just by pressing the mechanisms, tell you what, let's do this. So you might be able to see it a bit clearer. Let's move everything across. So just by pressing the mechanisms here, release some water. Yeah, tiny amount. I'll pick up a tiny little amount of ink. I don't know how much I need actually. We'll just go with the flow and see what happens. Now what I'm going to do, can you see that? I'm just going to brush this gently into the apertures of my stencil. And really gently. I might need to pick up a bit more ink, and I might not have needed quite so much water actually, but to say, this is just the beauty of playing. I haven't done this before, and I'm hoping this works. It's the idea that I had just as I came to air actually, so this is me going off piste a little bit. So what I'm just going to do, I'm only adding a tiny amount really, because I don't want to ruin, and I know this is onto Lisa's super smooth cardstock, so it doesn't necessarily like to take too much anything with too much water in it. So I'm doing this really gently, and I'm just going to add the colour there. So what I'm hoping is that when this dries, the mica in the interference inks is really going to come out, and just add just that tiny bit of sparkle. Now you can do this with a paintbrush as well. So I have a water spout, so a little bit amount of water on the blending mat there, so just enough to wet your brush. Okay, you don't want to make it sopping wet, and then you can pick up the interference ink again and perhaps a bit of water just to, so you're making this into a paint, and then you do exactly the same. And I'm just working that, oh you can't see now, there you go. I'm just working that into the areas where the petals are a little bit darker there, just to add a little bit of definition. Now to say, what I'm hoping for is that the mica is going to come out on this. If you don't have anything like this, or you prefer, the sparkle pens would be a really good way of doing this. The flash pastes that you can water down. Now, as I say, this idea came to me literally just as I went live, so I didn't have a chance to find my flash pastes. But the flash pastes watered down into a paint would work in exactly the same way. And again, it's entirely up to you how much you do. I think I might need a little bit more water. And if you really want to go to town and make the sparkle really appear, then obviously you'd add more ink. But I'm just doing this sort of quite gently, mainly because I wasn't sure if this was going to work or not. It's me experimenting online with you. Okay, so you can sort of see that coming. Now I'm going to leave that there so I can show you how to use the background, but that's a really nice way just to add detail, you know, really subtle detail without going over the top. So I can take that stencil away, and hopefully it will just enhance. As yeah, I can see a tiny amount of mica appearing there, so hopefully as that dries, that's really going to sort of come up. But yeah, but it's a really nice way actually to add detail. So let's get a wiggle on. So now we can do some embossing, and we can show you how the card comes together. Now I'm just going to cut this down to size so this fits into the embossing folder. I'm not particularly worried about the size that I'm cutting this, because this is going to be fussy cut out. But what I will do is trim down the, what's that? What is the background of the card? Oh, the background of the card. Okay, I'm just going to come on to that in a second, Laurie. Now, there is another set collection very similar to this, with a background also included as part of the embossing folder. And that other one, I can't remember, I think it's the Gardenia. The Magnolia, this one here that I'm using, doesn't. So this is really a nice way to do something different with the background. So this is the Whitecore card, and I'm just cutting this down to size to fit into the embossing folder, so I can do them both at the same time. So these are the two pieces I need to run through. Here's my embossing folder. I'm going to do this one first so I can line up actually, do you know what? I need to take a little bit more off the top just so that fits in. There we go. Okay, so that should give me the chance to line that up properly now. Yep. Okay, so I can line that up there. So I'm just going to run this through the machine. If you can bear with me a minute. Okay. Now you'll see, I think it was Laurie, wasn't it, asked the question there, that now that I've embossed this, the background, yeah, you can see there that we now have a background, the wood grain background against this flower. You can see on the background, which in itself, I mean, you don't actually need to do anything. It's such a lovely, lovely look the way that it is. But I'm going to emboss my piece of Whitecore card now. So this is Lisa's new range of Whitecore card. This is from the Mermaid set. This is the blue that I'm using from the Mermaid set. Okay, there we are. My embossing plates are such a mess at the moment, but do you know what? I'm holding off until Lisa brings out her new machine before I invest in some new ones, I think. Yeah, I won't bring them on screen. They're very embarrassed with the state of them. Okay, so there we are. I've embossed this piece as well now. So I'm just going to leave this piece aside, and I'm going to very quickly, I'm going to fussy cut this. Now, as I say, there is no die associated with this, but my advice would be, if you wanted to fussy cut this, it would be to stencil, then emboss, and then fussy cut, because the embossing gives you that nice definitive line to cut around. You could also emboss before you stencil. You could emboss, then you could fussy cut, and then you can use your tacky mat to line up your fussy cut piece underneath your stencils. And because your tacky mat will keep your stencils in place, you can do that. Now, I'm cutting this in real time for you, just show you that it is doable and it doesn't take too long. Now I'm using my trusted big scissors. I'm not a fussy cutter at all. It's something I don't generally have the patience for. But when I get an idea in my head, that's the time when I find the patience for it, as long as it's easy enough. But, you know, just something sort of came to me the other day, and I thought, what am I going to do and make with you today? But I thought it'd be a really nice way to incorporate the Whitecore card in the background of one of these lovely images. Now, as I say, this could actually be done with any of Lisa's floral collections, particularly the ones that do have the die, because obviously then you can die cut them out and then you could remount them on top of any embossed background, and you can emboss the Whitecore cardstock with any of your embossing folders and sand it back, and you'll get a fabulous effect. So it's a really nice way to actually invigorate and get you using your embossing folders again, even the ones that don't have these stencils. So this Whitecore card really does give you, or give your embossing folders, a new lease of life. Now, I shall come to that in a second. If you do get the Whitecore card and it's in stock as well, I would highly recommend getting at least the sand, the sanding blocks from Lisa as well, because once you can see what it does, it's you'll get a little bit addicted to it. So you can see there, it didn't actually take me that long to fussy cut that. I don't know how I use large scissors. I'm not quite sure, Lorraine. I only ever really use them when I'm being watched by you. I find smaller scissors, my cutting looks like a 3-year-old, to be honest. So I have to use the larger scissors because I make less cuts. I think that's what it is. I think that's the appeal of it. Right, so onto the background. Like Laurie was saying, so I have my Whitecore card here that is literally just embossed, and I've taken a piece of sandpaper. You would have Lisa sandpaper and Lisa sanding blocks, of course. I forgot to order them, but this does exactly the same job, and it's a fine sanding paper, and literally you take off the top of the Whitecore card. And now you can work this as much or as little as you want. I mean, if you can really sand it back, and you can have a really heavy duty look to the sanding or not. Now, you could also just use your embossing folder, and then you could really go to town. I apologise if this is quite noisy, isn't it? You could really go to town with sanding certain areas more than others as well. So you could get yourself a white flower just by sanding this and not the background. Okay. There's lots of different ways of doing this. So let me just hold that up to the camera now so you can see the difference. I haven't sanded this side, so it's still just the pure embossed. And then you can see on this side that the Whitecore fibers on the inside, or the middle layers of the cardstock, have been exposed because I've taken off the blue layer. Now, what I will show you, and this is why my hands are so mucky, and the sanding block, the dust does come off. So you will have an element of blue, pink, whatever colour your cardstock is, you will have some of the dust sitting around. So what I do suggest is that you have a cloth on hand to wipe that away. I didn't actually look. It's like I've played snooker. I've got the cue dust all over my the blue chalk all over my fingers. So I'm sanding that back. And actually, what it might actually be worth doing as well, to say you do get the colour, you do pick up the colour of the card on your sanding block as well. You may want to just sort of brush it off, or take it outside and sort of tap it on a surface and whatever before you go to another project, because obviously if I were going on to one of the lighter grey Whitecore card stocks to sand with this blue dust on, I'm going to spread the blue dust everywhere. So perhaps just be a little bit mindful of that as well. It's it's easily cleaned up, but I mean, if you're not somebody who cleans things as you go along, you might just forget, and I don't want you to contaminate your projects. So you can see there that I've just worked the sanding paper over the whole of the image, just concentrating mainly on the background, because that's what is going to show through there. So I'm going to put that to one side. Let's get myself a cloth. And I will, there is dust on my desk here. Actually, you can probably see it there. So just sweep that away. And also, you can see it sitting on the cloth now there. And just give your project a bit of a clean as well, because that it does come off. It's easily cleaned, but say it's just to prevent any sort of contamination. I don't want anything ruined. So we just do that. Okay, so that's the background sorted, which is really easy. And now you can see, and then I put this onto the cardstock, or onto the card base. So I'm just making a straightforward square card. It's just short of 6 by 6 square. So it's my favourite card to use. It's blue card this time. And I'm just putting that straight onto there. I did try layering it with white, but I much preferred the background going straight onto the card blank, to be honest with you. Okay, and then we can add a layer onto the top like that. And you can see that I've done that here with also, and I'll spend a little bit of time and I'll put some 3D foam pads under there. You can just glue it or attach it straight as well. You don't have to 3D it, because you cut it out. You've got that dimension from the two there anyway, which I think is really lovely. So it's a really straightforward way to change the background completely. And I think it really makes those blue flowers, or the white flowers with the blue centers, really pop through. Now, as I say, I'm just going to make this one into a Christmas card, and I've already stamped the happy. And what I wanted to show you also is these little sentiment dies don't come with dies either. Now, these text are really easy to cut out because it's sort of straightforward, but these ones perhaps a little bit trickier. And what I wanted to show you, I'm going to swap cameras again. Yeah, I've already stamped this, but you can see that I've drawn an outline around that word, and that outline has come from the stamp. So if you're someone who perhaps struggles cutting out or die your stamped letters, and we don't have a die for them, you can either do it before or afterwards. I've done this beforehand. You lay your stamp down, and you'll see, actually, let me move that again. You'll see that the shape of this stamp is actually, well, the stamp itself is shaped, and that follows the letters. That comes from the manufacturer. So let's use it, you know. So lay that down onto, if you've already a stamped image, on a stamped image, or just literally straight onto a piece of cardstock. Then take your pencil and draw round your stamp. So you've got that shape of the stamp sort of translated onto your cardstock, and then you can stamp inside it or not. And then that just gives you that helping hand to freehand cut your word sentiments out. Now, that's because I've chosen to use a sentiment without a die. There are lots of sentiments, of course, pre-made ones, so you don't even need to worry about it. Or we have a lot of stamped sentiments also with their own dies, so you don't need to worry about doing that. But if you do have your favourite sentiments that don't have dies, and you've always struggled even just to get consistency when you're perhaps die cutting, stamping lots of them, if you actually cut around the shape of the card, or the stamp, sorry, then that gives you that that cue to cut around. So I've done this with a happy. I've done exactly the same with, oh, let's move cameras now. I've done exactly the same with this word here with the U. And actually, do you know what another little trick is? Just to even hide, if you're not particularly confident doing that, another way to hide your cutting is to stamp your sentiment on the same colour background as the background of your card. If you noticed, I've stamped this onto blue, so therefore the edging that I've just cut sort of disappears into the background of the blue background of the card as well. So that's another way to do that. So I've got myself a little spare piece of super smooth cardstock. I'm going to take the little Christmas stamp. I'm just going to mount this onto an acrylic block to stamp with. I'll get myself a black ink. I can stamp that down. Lisa stamps always give us a lovely impression. I never have to worry about them not working. I'm going to put that straight back on there because I know that I will lose that. And then I can use my scissors. You can use a trimmer, but I'm quite happy with my scissors. Did your big scissors come, Mum? Did you say you ordered some? Did they come and have you tried them? Okay, trim that to size. I don't actually mind when I do this with words whether they come out particularly even or not, because sometimes I think I quite like the unevenness, and we can pop that onto there. So I think that works as a Christmas card. Okay. But it's a really nice way to add a different background to particularly these newer sets that have the background already built in to the embossing folder. It's a nice way to be able to isolate the background and give it a different look also. So that's with the Magnolia Corner. So I leave that with you there today. I ran over time a little bit, didn't I? But I'm back with you again on Thursday. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do. I might make a Christmas card. I might do what I done the other day and sort of mix and match perhaps some older things with some of the newer Christmas sets as well. But thanks so much for joining me today. Lisa isn't with us this week. She's recovering and being looked after amazingly by Danny, of course. So she's recuperating, so I wouldn't like to say when she comes back. There's no pressure, but we do have a busy week now that we have Paola and Catherine with us. I don't know who managed to tune in and see Paola on Monday. That's still floating around in the group to be watched, and I think it's on YouTube as well. But we have Catherine tomorrow at 8 o'clock with a hobby maker preview. No, that's tonight, sorry, it's 8 o'clock tonight, sorry, with a hobby maker preview. And Catherine will be hobby maker tomorrow, Wednesday afternoon at 2 and 3 o'clock, and then I'll be back with you on Thursday. So yeah, busy week, lots happening. We wish Lisa well, and of course she'll be back to us in no time at all. Thanks for joining me this afternoon, and I shall see you later in the week.